Well, everyone, as most of you know, the iPad Air 5th generation just came out, which I'm so happy about, but the iPad mini 6 also just came out, which is very interesting. So let's go and see how both of these iPads kind of compare, and I'll go ahead and break down which specific iPad you should go and pick up. Now, I will definitely tell you, first of all, I will leave both these iPads linked down in the description. You can get them from there and you can help support the channel at the same time. Now, the one thing to keep in mind about these iPads is that they are very, very similar. There's obviously some differences, but at their core features and even beyond their core features, there is a lot of similarity. So I wouldn't necessarily go from an iPad mini 6 to an iPad Air 5, and I wouldn't really go from an iPad Air 5 to an iPad mini 6. The big thing you're going to be seeing in terms of these two, not only are, the internals and everything, but the size of these iPads. The iPad mini 6 on the front has a 8.3-inch liquid retina panel. The iPad Air 5 has a 10.9-inch liquid retina panel. Now, personally, I don't think one panel looks way better than the other one. They both have True Tone. They both have kind of the same type of vibe to them. I will say the bezel on the iPad mini 6 seems a lot bigger and thicker than the iPad Air's panel, so keep that in mind, but I really don't think even that's that big of a deal. You have a little bit, I think you have like one more color option on the iPad Air 5, so if you want that, ability, you have that there, but you also have a little bit of a difference in the price tag. The iPad Air 5 is $100 more than the iPad mini 6, and for that $100, you're getting, I think, a few things. You're getting pretty much that. You're getting a few things. So you're getting, that bigger panel, which is great, but you're also getting that newer chipset inside, which can also be an advantage for some people. We'll talk all about that in a second, but they both have USB Type-C ports on the bottom. They both support Apple Pencil 2, which is great. They both have the, a full aluminum back on the back of these things also, which is really nice. Interestingly enough, they both tap out at 256 gigabytes of storage within it, which can be a little bit smaller of amount of storage, especially if you're trying to use this thing as your main device. That can be kind of an annoyance. Personally, for me, I like having as much storage as possible. But at the same time, on my iPhone, I only have 128 gigabytes and I've never really seemed to run out of storage. So I think 256 is probably fine, but I do have a terabyte in my MacBook and I use my MacBook a lot more than I use my iPhone. So I will say if you need more storage, you may want to go up to an iPad Pro, but these two iPads will probably be fine for a lot of people. Now on the back, like I mentioned, they both have the, camera setups, which we'll go and hit on right now. The iPad mini 6 has that single wide-angle lens on the back. The iPad Air 5 also has a single wide-angle lens on the back. They both can shoot in the same video resolutions and everything, which is great, but they also have the same front-facing camera as well, that 12-megapixel ultra-wide sensor. So they both support that center stage capability, which is really cool, and I actually do like that kind of stuff a lot. Now, weirdly enough, on the iPad Air 5, I don't think that, iPad has a flash on it, which was very strange. I didn't even know why that happened. The iPad mini 6 does have a flash on it, so I never really noticed that before. Personally, I guess then I don't really use my iPad cameras all that much, and I don't really use flash all that much either. So I guess that's one way to look at it, but I didn't even notice that before, so that was actually very interesting that I just noticed that. I will say in terms of camera quality and camera features, pretty much the same things across the board. I don't really think you're going to go and pick up an iPad Air 5 or an iPad mini 6 because of the camera. I think it's pretty much a byproduct of the capability behind both of these tablets, and like I mentioned, I think the iPad Air 5 camera is perfectly fine. I think the iPad mini 6 camera is perfectly fine, but it's not going to be replacing my iPhone 13 Pro's camera. Even an iPhone 11 camera, I would say, is better than these two cameras. The only thing these two things have going for themselves are the front cameras, and they both have the same type of front camera. So in terms of the camera setup, I think they're both fine, and I wouldn't necessarily go from one to the other because of the camera. Now, in terms of the software longevity, this is where things get a little bit interesting. So they both have pretty much the newest chipsets that Apple makes. The Apple A15 Bionic that's in the iPad mini 6 is technically newer than the M1 chipset that Apple made, I think the end of 2020. Now, personally, I think both these chipsets are awesome, but it does seem like to me that the M1 chipset is probably the main focus of Apple. It's hard to see what the future of these chipsets are going to be, but since the fact that Apple has placed this chipset in so many different products, it's either they're going to support this thing for a long time or they're not going to support this thing at all and make people upgrade in the future. I think the A series of chipsets have been great, and it's easy to tell how long this iPad mini 6 is going to last. It's probably going to last, another 5 years, maybe even longer than that. It's going to last for a very long time. With something like the iPad Air 5, it's hard to tell because even though it's still a pretty new chipset and it's in the same MacBooks and all these MacBook Pros and the Mac Studio and everything, it could still very well be a situation where it only lasts for another 3, 4, 5 years. Who knows? I know the A15 is going to last for a long time, but maybe the M1 is going to be updated soon. Like, I don't know how it works with M1 chipsets and iPads. So I guess we'll see what happens in the future. But in terms of software longevity, that's kind of how I would break that down. Now, in terms of performance, this is also another very interesting thing. Because the M1 chipset is the latest and greatest, I think Apple is going to be focusing iPadOS for that M1 chipset. You know, they put it in all their iPads for the most part except the 2 bottom tier ones, so it has to be faster, right? Well, in my opinion, from testing the iPad mini 6 and testing the iPad Air 5, I personally don't think there's that big of a difference at all between the performance of either one of these chipsets. In fact, I think when the M1 iPad Pro came out last year, I compared that to the A14 Bionic chip, and I couldn't even tell that big of a difference at all, and I think the A14 was probably sometimes faster than the M1 chipset. So it's really neck and neck. I don't think one is way faster than the other one, and I think M1 chipset is kind of like a brand marketing thing. I think there's going to be specific software features that are going to be happening in the future that are going to be tailored for the M1 chipset. So if you have an iPad Air 5, you will pretty much be suited for those, features coming out of the future. But I do think with the Apple A15 Bionic chip, I don't really think it's that much slower or faster than the M1 chipset. When I was using my iPad mini 6 and I'm using my iPad Air 5, I don't necessarily think that one iPad is way better than the other one. They both give me the same type of impressions. They both give me the same type of vibe. And the best way to describe it is I wouldn't necessarily go into either one of these iPads thinking one is faster or slower than the other one. I pretty much got the same exact vibe between them, and these iPads are way more similar than not. They support pretty much the same type of accessories. You don't really get that magic keyboard on the iPad mini 6, but you still have the ability of working that with, Bluetooth keyboards, connecting it to other mouses and different things like that. The performance is great on both. I played a lot of heavy intensive games on both as well, and I got really, really good performance from both of these. Again, I'm not somebody who's performing and playing a bunch of games on these things, so keep that in mind. But from what I tested, both of these were giving me tremendous performance, and I had a great time with it for sure. So in terms of performance, that kind of covers it up there. Now, funny enough, Apple actually estimates that all these iPads, the iPad Air and the iPad mini 6, even the iPad Pros, are going to be giving you the same type of battery life. Although I would probably say the iPad Air 5 may give you better battery life at the end of the day. Maybe there's some optimizations in the A15 that's better than the M1 chipset right now. So it's hard to tell what's going to happen in the future. But from their own spec sheet, they state that they both are going to be giving you the same type of battery life. So again, I wouldn't really go from one iPad to the other just based off battery life alone. But that is one of the bigger things to keep in mind right there. So to kind of sum up this whole entire video, what I can tell you, I think both of these iPads are very, very important. And I do think they both have places. But I would probably kind of side for the iPad Air 5 personally for me. I like having a little bit of a bigger, sized iPad when it comes down to it. I like being able to just pick up my iPad and then just kind of having a big display right there. I think the iPad mini 6 reminds me too much of my iPhone, to be honest. I feel like it's a good size, and if you're somebody who just wants a smaller device to, a little bit more portability, well, you can't really go wrong with the iPad mini 6. I mean, there's very few differences in terms of the internals. Like I mentioned, same type of camera setup, they have the same type of accessories for the most part. The camera may be a little bit better on the iPad mini 6, to be honest, because of that flash, but you have pretty much the same exact thing between them. It's also a little bit cheaper on the iPad mini 6, if you want to pick that up. But personally, I like the iPad Air 5. I like that bigger sized panel, I like that bigger sized display, and I feel like it is a big jump for, it being a replacement of my MacBook. I would never fully replace my MacBook with any other device, but I feel like I would have an easier time replacing it with a bigger iPad like the iPad Air 5 than something like a smaller iPad like the iPad mini 6. So it really comes down to size for me. But if you don't care about it, then the iPad mini 6 is a much better deal for $100 cheaper than the iPad Air 5. I don't think it's a bad idea at all. So in terms of that kind of covers it up there. If you guys have any other questions or anything like that, let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.